I'm Greg Hutter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, I call it a national treasure. He's a young guy in his early 30s. He is a foreign correspondent for the New American. He started a website called libertysentinel.org. He is the founder and the editor of that. He is Alex Newman. And Alex Newman, you never disappoint. Thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
You have a brand new article on your libertysentinel.org website. Despite bailout, pension tsunami threatens to crush U.S. And all this has bubbled up. You had Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, saying the states should use bankruptcy. You've had Nancy Pelosi saying, "Oh no, we're going to bail out the states." You've had the president saying, "I'll do the best for the American people," and tweeting out, "Why should all these other states pay for these states that are poorly run?" All this under the backdrop of nobody's even mentioning the $21 trillion that's missing at the Department of Defense and DOD and HUD. Of course, they're not going to use any of that money. They're just ignoring that. But it looks like this is working into a real fight. What's your take on this fight between Pelosi, the Democrats, the blue states? Mnuchin says, the Treasury Secretary, they all seem to be on the same page in the administration. Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, says, states aren't going to be bailed out. So where are we at? Where are we going with this?
Well, I'm so glad you called me last night to ask about this, Greg, because this has been on my radar for over 12 years. And, the interesting thing about this is that the Democrats are all lying. And I know, people are like, oh, okay, well, what else is new, right? They always lie all the time. And that's true. But they're acting like it was the coronavirus and the shutdowns that caused this financial tsunami in the public pension system that's coming to devour our country and our people and our taxpayers. Really, 12 years ago, I put out an article in the New American, and I mentioned it in that brief report I did at the Liberty Sentinel, warning that exactly what we're seeing today was coming. You have now, according to Stanford University's research, a $5 trillion deficit in the pension system because it's underfunded, because the Democrats and even, unfortunately, some Republicans have made all these promises that they can't keep. This has been in the works for over a decade, at least, probably longer than that. That's just when I came across it. And now they're acting like it was the coronavirus. So I'm hoping that the Trump administration and that the Republicans in Congress will stand firm. But I've already seen some evidence that Mitch McConnell may be waffling. He's saying, well, maybe we'll put some strings on. Maybe if they limit liability for coronavirus, maybe if they do this, that, and the other. But this is not a solution. I was incredibly happy to see Donald Trump speak out on Twitter. It's really unfair to make the taxpayers in Florida and New Hampshire and Wyoming pay for the outrageous pensions and the outrageous government spending in New York and Illinois and California. That's what the Democrats are hoping to do. And, it's critical that President Trump and the Republicans in Congress hold the line and say, absolutely no more of this. It's too much.
Some of these people this isn't just a few bucks. This isn't like somebody making $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 in retirement. The pensions are stunning. Do you have some information on that?
It would blow the average person's mind, Greg. And the numbers are so out there. You have people in Illinois who are collecting government pensions, and I'm talking government pensions. These are supposedly public servants. $550,000, $450,000, $420,000 per year. They are able to retire after about 30 years of service with a full pension. Even teachers, right? Teachers, they retire after 30 years. They start teaching when they're 22. They retire when they're 52. They retire with a $72,000 a year pension. Automatically, every year, cost of living increase about 3% compounding. So within a decade, you'll be getting $90,000, $100,000 per year pension. They don't have the money to do this. It is completely unsustainable. Unfortunately, it's a problem even in the red states, even in the well-managed states, financially well-managed states. This is going to be a problem. It's just hitting in Illinois and New York and California and Connecticut first. But this is going to be a problem of epic proportions. And there's a whole nother angle to this that nobody ever talks about, Greg. And I think everybody who's watching this needs to understand. People often wonder, why are all these big companies, Fortune 500 companies that serve millions of customers, that depend on the free enterprise system and that depend on the goodwill of hardworking Christian and conservative American patrons to stay in business, How is it that the left is able to hijack these companies and force them to start promoting social justice and all the agendas of the left, the LGBT stuff? How is it that they're able to convince the companies to do that? The answer is simple. They've got trillions of dollars locked up in these pension plans, these government-funded government employee pension plans, and they go to these companies and they say, hey, we can make or break your company. We can buy stock up the yazoo, or we can sell you short and destroy your company. What we want you to do is, worry about climate change and promote social justice and make advertising. So this is how they are manipulating and hijacking these major American companies. So you have all these problems all rolled into one, and the Democrats and the deep state are hoping to use the American taxpayer now to bail out this whole gigantic scam. It's not possible. It is, I mean, even if they were to do the bailout, it wouldn't actually solve the problem. But we're dealing with so many problems all rolled up into one, Greg. And I'm not kidding when I say this will quite literally destroy the economy of the United States if we don't deal with it.
Well, how so?
Well, again, we have a $5 trillion unfunded liability just in the state and local pensions for the government employees at the state and local level. That may be even bigger now with the stock market declines. Then you have the federal government pension plans that are also running massive, massive deficits, massive unfunded liabilities into the trillions of dollars. There's no way that this can be sustainable. You have more and more government employees retiring with more and more benefits, a shrinking tax base, a devastated economy. 27 million people lost their job. There's no way. The math, I mean, it's just a math question, right? It's not a political question. It's not a question of ideology. It's just a math question. There is no way to continue perpetuating this system. It will destroy the American economy. It will destroy the American taxpayer, and there still will be no way to pay these pensions. So we're going to have to come up with a solution, and it's going to have to involve drastic reductions in these payments, in these payouts to these government employees. It's going to have to involve drastic cuts in government spending. And, they're already terrorizing people. You see the Democrats, the governor of Illinois, oh, we're going to have to, and in New York, of course, we're going to have to cut your police and your firefighters and your no more teachers. And this is baloney, right? This is absolute baloney. But that's what they're going to use. They're going to use fear-mongering, scaremongering, guilt-tripping, right? Oh, your police, they risk their lives. And it's true. We should respect our police. But there's no reason for this pension system to be allowed to destroy the American economy and the American people. It's got to be reformed, and giving them a bailout is just going to kick the can down the road a couple years. They're still going to have to do these.
Can you imagine the disaster that this is going to be in terms of inflation if they did do this? I mean, Illinois is what, $140 billion in the hole? I mean, they tried
just their unfunded pension liabilities. $140 billion.
The last bill, they stripped a lot of this stuff out. I know they've given some money to the states, but they stripped a lot of this stuff out because they were targeting Illinois. And somebody wrote me and said, "Hey, listen, on my property tax form, it says how much is going to the pensions." And I wonder if they were fearful that they would have to raise taxes so high they'd be booted out of power.
It's a very real possibility. And you're right. Illinois, 1/4 of the state budget is now going to government pension plans. That number is going to radically increase in the days ahead. They're going to have to fire government workers, and they're going to have to keep allocating more and more to these pensions. But even in very wealthy and supposedly well-managed financially communities and cities and states, we have a very similar problem. One of the places I looked at is Coral Gables in Florida. Very, very wealthy community in South Florida. Florida is supposed to be, if not the best financially managed state, among the top 5, certainly. And even there, you have about 1/5 of the budget is going to the pensions. And we have this huge wave of government retirees now that are going to start collecting pension benefits, that are going to stop paying in. The numbers just don't work. And so, the Democrats are now crying foul. Pretty soon the Republicans are going to be crying foul too. And you're right. We already had $150 billion in the CARES Act went to the state governments. We also had $90 billion that went to the public school systems and to the Medicaid system. So we've already sent hundreds of billions of dollars from the federal government. Much of this, of course, is just going to be printed up by the Federal Reserve to bail out these state governments.
But it's a drop. Sustainable. It's drop in the bucket, though.
It is, compared to the $6 trillion they're talking about. Yeah, it is a drop in the bucket. But
ultimately, no. I mean, compared to the $5 trillion of underfunding of all.
Oh, exactly. Hundreds of billions of dollars is not going to make any difference with the $5 trillion in underfunded liabilities and unfunded liabilities that these pensions have. I interviewed the head of CalPERS at the UN summit in Madrid because he had given a speech there. I mean, in retrospect, I wish I had this whole thing on camera. We could show it now. We do have the interview on camera. And he gave this speech about how wise and wonderful the California public employee retirement system was, and how they're urging companies and they're forcing companies to be more climate conscious and green and all this. And I asked him after his speech, we went up to him and we did an interview, and I said, hey, don't you have an obligation to try to earn the best returns possible for the people who are invested in this pension plan? He said, well, yeah, but we take a long-term view, and we think if we destroy the world with global warming, then we're all doomed anyway. So I mean, these pension plans are manipulating our companies. They're bankrupting the taxpayers. And, California's feeling it now, but again, it's going to hit all over the country, Greg. This is not just going to be a liberal state problem. And, if we have the Federal Reserve print up all this money, we're going to destroy the dollar. If we have the federal government borrow all this money and the Federal Reserve print up all the money, it's still going to destroy the dollar, and it's going to saddle our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren with debts that are completely impossible to pay. So, I mean, we are facing an economic cataclysm, and nobody wants to talk about it. That's the thing. And it's not new. It has nothing to do with coronavirus. This was a problem even before anybody ever heard of COVID-19. It is a disaster of epic proportions, and a bailout from Congress is not going to fix it.
Well, what's brought this up to the front page, we've heard about this for years, is all of a sudden, I mean, we knocked out, just look at gasoline. Well, one trader was saying, that's what I'm using for a metric. We knocked 50% of the demand, a little bit more actually, out of the gasoline market. How much are we going to get that back? I mean, how much, look at all the demand. You go to any shopping center or a mall, or you look up and down Main Street, close, for rent, close, for rent, close. I mean, how much are we going to get back when this opens up? And so now it shines a bright light on all these pensions where they could kind of hump along before, and now that's what they're saying, is that they were already in trouble before COVID-19. This is going to be a real fight.
It is. It's going to be a tragedy of enormous proportions, Greg. I mean,
Why?
you have, again, 27 million Americans have now lost their job. Thousands, maybe tens or even hundreds of thousands of small businesses are going to be bankrupt in the coming months. And, all the government stimulus in the world, which most of it's going to the big businesses and the mega banks anyway, it's not going to be able to stop this. And so what do you do when you see government employees who are retiring with 100, 200, 300? There was a firefighter in Miami-Dade County, and, God bless the firefighters. They risk their lives. They do important work, and we appreciate them. But there was a firefighter in Miami-Dade County. He was in the news down there, making $425,000 per year from his pension. As he was doing what's called double dipping, right? They work in one government job, retire after 25 or 30 years, move to another government job, collect another pension. So these guys are retiring. When you actually do the math and you figure out, what's the average lifespan of these people when they're retiring, you have government employees, including in the state of Illinois, including in New York, who are going to be paid out about $20 million by the time they pass away. And we're not even looking at...
Wait, hold on. $20 million each.
$20 million each per person. That's right. There's one Dr. Leslie, who was a professor at the University of Illinois, bringing down more than $550,000 per year in pension payments from the state of Illinois. Now, and they say, well, the government employees, they're not compensated as well as the private sector employees, so we need to give them these wonderful pensions to make everything okay. Wrong. The data shows that government sector employees are compensated at significantly higher rates than private sector employees for the same work. Plus, they have endless job security. Plus, they have these outrageous pensions. Plus, they have benefits forever. And it's simply not sustainable. Again, no disrespect to police or firefighters or teachers. We love them. But we need to be clear. It's unsustainable. It's a ripoff. It's a scam. And really, these people are being used and manipulated, too. I mean, the reason the Democrat politicians agree to these things is not because they love police and firefighters. It's because they want the votes from big labor. So it's a really nasty political machine. And I was happy to see Mitch McConnell allude to this. What you have here is these huge government employee unions run by communists, radical leftists, deep state operatives. They suck up all this money from union dues, even from people who don't even want to be part of the union, sucking up all this money. Then they recycle that money back into the campaign coffers of Democrat politicians. About 95% of the big labor money is going to Democrat politicians. And then the Democrats say, oh, sure, we'll give you a bigger pension. Oh, sure, we'll give you more benefits. And it's a vicious cycle. And they've been able to get away with it because they've been fudging the numbers. They've been using totally unrealistic assumptions. They've been basically creating this massive Ponzi scheme. And now they're saying, oh, coronavirus, now we need a federal bailout. Sorry, but no, not going to work, not sustainable. We need to actually have real solutions to these problems. And I think one interesting idea that's been floated, Greg, and I'm not a big fan of the Social Security system. In fact, I think it's unconstitutional. It ought to be abolished. It's another giant Ponzi scheme. But one interesting idea I heard, Greg, is why don't we take all these government sector employees and all their pension plans? They've got about $5 trillion under management in these state and local government sector pensions. Dump that all into Social Security. For perspective, Social Security has about less than $3 trillion in its trust fund. So just the 17% of Americans who work for state and local governments have $5 trillion under management plus $5 trillion in unfunded liabilities that the taxpayers are going to have to make up. That's $10 trillion versus the 83% of Americans who actually have to work in the private sector who are hoping to get some Social Security at some point. They've got less than $3 trillion in this so-called trust fund. So why not take all the money from the state and local government pension plans, dump it into Social Security, put all these government workers into Social Security as well, maybe give them a 401k plan or whatever, and then, hey, we're all, they keep saying we're all in this together, right? They're all collecting their big fat paychecks and their big fat pensions while we're all non-essential, stuck at home, losing our jobs, having our businesses shut down. So we're all in this together. Well, how about let's actually be all in this together? Let's take all those pensions, put them into Social Security, then we'll be all in this together. Then we can maybe start working on some solutions.
Yeah, and FDR hated public pensions. I mean, I'm of the mind. Listen, if you have a pension, you have a union contract, and you work for GM or Chrysler or whoever. Hey, you're just getting a piece of the profits. Okay. When you have state workers, there's no profits, just taxpayers. That's right. The problem with it.
And there's a huge difference. Also
FDR hated. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg.
FDR hated public pensions, and he was a Democrat. And for this reason.
Public sector unions too. I mean, public sector unions are completely different animals from private sector unions. And I'm not a big fan of private sector unions either. But at least they have to live within reality.
Correct.
Right? Because if they go to GM and they say, hey, we want a pension for $1 billion whatever dollars, GM will have to say, no, that would bankrupt our company, and so you'd all be out of work, and we'd all be broke. No, we can't do that. We have to live within our means here. Well, government sector unions don't have that problem because, hey, we'll just keep squeezing the sucker taxpayers, and we'll just bankrupt them if we have to pay these pensions. But I mean, this is such a serious problem, Greg, and nobody has wanted to talk about it up until now. So I was just delighted that you called me to come talk about this. Again, this was on my radar 12 years ago. You can go back and read that article we did in the New American. It was called Cancerous Growth of Government. I quoted it in that brief report I did at Liberty Sentinel. And you can see we actually warned at some point, probably in the not too distant future, they're going to have to drastically raise taxes. They're going to be begging the federal government for a bailout, and it's going to be a crisis of epic proportions. Well, that has arrived. And I want to say one more thing about the difference between these public sector pensions and private sector pensions, Greg. A lot of people don't understand this, but the public sector pensions, these are what's called defined benefit plans. So basically, they put in, and then they will get a defined benefit every year, as long as they live. Right, which starts off typically at around $70,000 a year. Sometimes starts off at $100,000 or $200,000 a year, but they will get that forever. Private sector did away with this decades ago because it's not sustainable, right? So what the private sector has typically, the overwhelming majority of the workers in the private sector who are fortunate enough to have a pension, they have what's called a defined contribution plan. And so when the stock market gets crushed amid a coronavirus shutdown or whatever the case may be, that means their pensions are also crushed, and taxpayers are not going to come to the rescue. The government sector employees have a totally different system, and it's frankly not fair. It is a glaring example of unfairness. And I think even government employees, if they look at these numbers, if they look at these numbers, if they look at this situation, they will recognize, they will be forced to acknowledge this is not fair. Something has got to be done.
And thus, you have Mitch McConnell saying that they should tap the bankruptcy laws. You have presidents saying, why should everybody else in the country bail out these states? I think it's going to be an awful fight, and it's all come to life because of, like you said, 27 million and counting unemployed, people being destroyed. I don't know where, I don't even know where the governors get the authority to say you can't earn a living. Oh, and you still owe your mortgages and your rents and your leases and your car payments and your credit card. You still have to pay all that, but you can't earn any money. So I'm thinking to myself, this is like the Twilight Zone.
It really is, Greg. And we just did a special report in the New American about the coronavirus, and I was very blessed to be able to write the article on the economic problem. And I mean, there's so much going on here, Greg, and I know you know a lot of this, but for the viewers out there, I mean, what's happening is They are crushing the mom and pop businesses, the independent worker, the blue collar worker, consolidating everything, right? You notice that every community, Walmart and Amazon are hiring. Oh, isn't that nice? And meanwhile, all the mom and pop shops are going broke. They're being shut down because they're non-essential. And really, who do these government people, these governors and these mayors think they are to declare us non-essential, our churches non-essential, but they themselves, well, they're super essential, so they get, all the paychecks get to continue, they get to, continue doing whatever they want. What's happening here, I think, is an orchestrated deep state consolidation of power, consolidation of economic control, very much along the lines of what we saw during the Great Depression, right? This was an engineered crisis, and what they did during the Great Depression and now, asset prices collapsed. They came in, scooped up everything for pennies on the dollar. I think we're going to see massive consolidation out of this, and who's going to end up on top? Big government, big business, and the big banks. Who's going to end up paying for it all? Well, that's you and I, Greg, and the people watching this video, the normal, everyday, tax-paying, hard-working American citizen who's just trying to make ends meet.
Well, the Walmarts of the world win. Amazon wins. Big food suppliers win. And evidently, state and local employees, well, the people making the decisions, still got a check.
That's right. And that's why they don't care. Hey, we'll keep it shut down forever. Let's keep it shut down through the fall, right? Well, what should they care? That their salaries are still coming in. They don't have to worry about making a mortgage payment for their business. They don't have to worry about making the salary payments for their employee. They don't have to worry about firing 3/4 of their workforce. So, it's easy for them to say, hey, well, we'll just be in this together. You guys all just stay shut down, right? It's criminal, Greg, what's happening. Kudos to the governor of South Dakota, the governor of Arkansas, the governor of some of these states that have resisted this. And I think one of the most recent interviews I did with you, Greg, I was in Sweden, and it's interesting. I lived in Sweden many years. Sweden is wrong about almost everything, but for once, they're coming out on the right side of an issue. I think the reason why is, they need the American people to submit to this kind of totalitarianism. The Swedes are already gone. They'll submit to totalitarianism anytime you tell them to. So this is, I think, an operation against the American people, against liberty. And we could go into so many different things. You see the Democrats now trying to sneak these digital dollars into all their bailout bills. You see the IMF now promoting this idea that it's going to inject global liquidity in the form of special drawing rights into the economy to bail out third world governments and dictators. You see now Bill Gates demanding that we all get these vaccines before anything can go back to normal. He's been funding this research on these tattoos that'll go on your skin to prove that you got your vaccine. I mean, they are pushing so many dangerous agendas, not just to our economic freedom, but to our personal liberty, to our economic well-being. It's a very, very dangerous time we're in. On the bright side, a lot of these issues are getting exposed, like the public pension plan. This is the first time in 12 years that we've had a serious national discussion about this tsunami that's about to swallow up our economy. But all these different issues are so important. They need to be talked about. And, thank goodness that we have President Trump in the White House and not Hillary Clinton. It would be infinitely worse. But, still, what they've been able to get away with so far is just criminal. It's going to be a disaster for our children, for our grandchildren. It's terrifying.
Predictions. Do you think Trump will pull it off? Do you think he'll pull an FDR and in the midst of massive unemployment be reelected?
I think it's possible, and this stimulus bill that they passed before, they're now on third or fourth stimulus bill. We've got trillions of dollars going to all these different cronies. So Trump now is talking about using this opportunity to start rebuilding our infrastructure. Well, one of the reasons why our infrastructure is crumbling is because 1/4, 1/3 of our state and local government budgets are going to public pension plans. So, this is a good opportunity for us to start rebuilding our infrastructure, but we have to use some common sense here. We can't keep paying these enormous pensions. We can't keep allowing the Federal Reserve to print money up to infinity and then charge us interest on the debt that they never even created in the first place. We can't keep allowing government to spend endless amounts of money. This idea that the government can bail everybody out, if you just stop and think about it for 30 seconds, it's self-evidently ludicrous. The government can't bail out the workers and the companies and the banks and the states and the local governments and the churches. It's self-evidently ridiculous. So I hope Trump will take this opportunity. Maybe we'll get an infrastructure package, try to start getting some workers back to work. But we've got to bring the debt down. Got to get the Federal Reserve under control, got to deal with these public pensions, and it is going to be a task of enormous proportions. I hope Trump can make some progress on it, but the task is so big and so complicated. I almost feel like it would take a miracle to have some success on this.
Well, maybe we just need to pray for a miracle. I mean, I know
We do.
you're a big Christian, and and I think the miracle might be just, hey, you need to file bankruptcy, and bankruptcy would force you to cut the pensions and force you to cut the,
Yeah.
and then. But I think this is what scares the Democrats, and tell me if I'm wrong. Because the last bill they targeted Illinois, so Illinois is wobbly, and I think they were afraid that, man, if this doesn't get bailed out, there's going to be a tax revolt. We're not going to be able to tax anybody anymore. I mean, we still have the Second Amendment. There are still people armed in the countryside, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think they're very worried.
You think they're worried about not getting a bailout and losing control of the bluest of blue states?
I do think they're very worried about that, and they're worried that the truth will get out. I mean, even reasonable Democrats, even tax-paying, reasonable citizens who are Democrats, who maybe they like big government, maybe they don't mind high taxes. If they saw just the numbers, go read these reports that we've written. If you see just the numbers involved in these pension plans and these bailouts, this would be enough to make the most progressive furious. As long as you're intellectually honest and you have some sense of fairness, this would outrage you. So we really do need a miracle. We really should be praying for our country. I think we're on the verge of a potential cataclysm if these things don't get dealt with. And the first step in dealing with the problem is, of course, identifying the problem, admitting you have a problem. Right? When you're an alcoholic, what's the first step? Right? Okay, admit that you have a problem. Okay, I'm an alcoholic. That's the first step. So we need to admit here that we have some enormous problems. We can't just ask the Federal Reserve to print trillions of dollars and hope it all goes away magically. It's not going to go away magically. These are actual problems that need to be addressed. So, this is a good first step. We're now having a national conversation about some of these issues. But if we're not careful, if they're able to manipulate the American people, who, of course, have been, dumbed down by the media, dumbed down by the public education system, very, poor math skills, we'll say. I don't want to say anything mean, but our math skills are not great. Our reasoning skills are not great. If they're able to manipulate us into doing the wrong things, I don't think it's hype or fear mongering to say we might very well lose our constitutional republic. A lot of people have died to make sure we could be blessed with the freedoms and this form of government that we have. It would be an incredible shame if it was frittered away on our watch, but that's the way we're headed if we're not careful.
Alex Newman, you have Liberty Sentinel. Of course, you are a international or a foreign correspondent for the New American. That's one of your jobs, but you also, they let you moonlight into the website over your shoulder, libertysentinel.org. You do take donations. I don't see a lot of advertising on your site. You do take donations and things like that. I guess there is a some sort of PayPal or snail mail address I can put up for you to help you spread the word of freedom and liberty. That's what you're about, spreading the theme of freedom, liberty, and informing people about what's going on, like this giant pension crisis that has finally bubbled up. Right?
It is. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Greg. I sure appreciate that. If people want to donate something, they can go to libertysentinel.org/donate. And there's PayPal, there's snail mail, there's Patreon. I'm trying to get some kind of cryptocurrency thing. And I do a lot of things. The New American foreign correspondent is, my main activity. I go around the world writing investigative pieces. And again, 12 years ago, we did one on this public pension thing. I will be doing go ahead.
How much money did they owe then, 12 years ago?
Back then, the problem was a fraction of what it was. So we had trillions in unfunded liabilities. I think the numbers were about 2 or 3 trillion in unfunded liabilities. But there were forecasts that if this didn't get fixed, we would be dealing with 5, 6, 7 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Now we're there. Right now we're there.
Yeah.
So we warned about all this. We actually explained exactly what was going to come. So I'll be doing another in-depth piece in the New American about that. If people want to get a subscription, it's thenewamerican.com. I also write for a lot of other publications, Greg, the Epic Times. I do an education blog over at Freedom Project. We just started a new organization to help liberate children from public schools. It's called Public School Exit. So I do a whole lot of things, but journalism is really my passion and education are my passion. And I was just so thrilled when you called me about these public pensions, Greg, because I've been trying to get people to listen about this issue for so long. Now it's at the forefront, and so it's good we're talking about it.
An issue with Speaker Pelosi, the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the Treasury Secretary, the President's tweeting about it just a couple of days ago and been asked questions about it. What a food fight. Watch this. This is going to get ugly.
It is.
It's going to get ugly. Because I don't think the president's going to cave.
I hope not.
I,
And, we should be supporting him. Call the White House. Tell them no bailouts for lunatic Democrat governors and mayors who bankrupted their cities and bankrupted their states.
yeah.
Detroit could declare bankruptcy. Stockton could declare bankruptcy. You know what happened, Greg, of course, is all the bondholders got stiffed and the government employees continued to collect their enormous pensions. That's probably along the lines of what we'll see. But, they've got to get on the path of fiscal sustainability. A bailout from the federal government wouldn't even solve the problem. Again, even if we were to do the bailout, which would be a terrible idea, it wouldn't actually fix the problem. At best, we would be right back where we are in a couple years. We'd be having the same debate. Then maybe we'd have, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, maybe we'll have a Democrat in the White House. It could be a disaster. So now is the time to force these state governments, these local governments to fix this system. We've got to defang the public employee unions. And we've got to sort these things out. It's the future of our children and our nation and our freedoms that are literally on the line here.
Alex Newman, libertysentinel.org is the website. I'll put up some links. I'll actually put your snail mail down in the after the interview section. I'll actually put the actual snail mail. I know you have that as well. I'll put your donation link up too. Your website, there's a brand new article on it just if people want to read. Despite bailout, pension tsunami threatens to crush U.S. is the title out. Link to your website's at the top page, top part of your Liberty Sentinel, also New American. Alex Newman, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. Always a pleasure, and God bless.